Let's speak to Pablo Hanna now, who's a senior political advisor, joins us from London. Pablo, welcome. Do you agree with this sentiment that this was an election lost by the Conservatives as much as won by Labour?
Yeah, I think that probably is the case. I think what we call it is an ABC election, which is anything but Conservatives. You've seen Labour and the Liberal Democrats in particular making huge gains at the expense of the Conservatives. The Lib Dems in particular laying waste to the cabinet. They are just taking out secretary after secretary after minister. So yeah, it's. I think it is a win for Labour, and they should absolutely be congratulated for that. They have overturned an astonishing majority. I mean, we shouldn't forget that in 2019, Boris Johnson won the election with a huge majority, and Keir Starmer has overturned that resoundingly. But it is also a case that this has been very much an election of just anyone but the Conservatives.
Right. So, which brings us back to that point I was discussing with our correspondent Rory Challenge just now, that the sense is nothing like it was when Tony Blair came in back in 1997 with the big majority. There's very much a feeling that, Keir Starmer isn't as popular, is he, for a start?
I think that is true, but I also think that there's an element that people wanted to see a change in this country, and I do think it is true. Well, it is true that the polling showed that Keir Starmer's popularity is not as high as Tony Blair's was, but I mean, I think that probably speaks more to just how unpopular the Conservatives were. And as I say, that is why we've seen all the parties, including even some independents, taking seats off the Conservatives, and a kind of restructuring of the political landscape. And across the UK, actually, we're seeing a big change in Northern Ireland, in Scotland as well. It is true that Keir Starmer is going to enter number 10 as not an overwhelmingly popular Prime Minister, but he is going to walk in there with a huge majority, and he can do pretty much as he pleases. Right.
Well, he's got a lot to do, isn't he? I mean, the list is endless. Stagnant economy, cost of living, education system, the NHS, confidence in politicians. It goes on and on. He's not going to have much of a honeymoon period, is he?
No, he's really not. He's going to have to hit the ground running, and I think he probably will. Actually, I think he is pretty committed to this idea of putting service back into politics, and I think that there is an element that our country needs. That we need to kind of go back to sort of calmer politics, where our Prime Minister is not hiding in fridges and doing the kind of crazy things that Boris Johnson was doing. So I think, or crashing the economy as Liz Truss did. So I think there's an element that actually just having a Prime Minister who's going to kind of come in, steady the ship, and kind of hit the ground running and get the country moving, enact the change that he wants to. He has an absolute mandate to do that, and no one can deny that. He's gonna have a lot to do. he's gonna have a busy time, and he's gonna start from a place where he's gonna have to earn the trust and the popularity of the country. Even though he has earned this mandate, he has won a resounding victory, but he is not going to enter particularly popularly.
What about the other big story, Reform UK, the big surge in vote there? It looks as if they could become the third most popular party, at least in terms of vote share.
Yeah, I think so. At the last count, just before I came on, they were up to 4 seats. So Farage is in, their deputy leader Richard Tice is in. I think that it speaks to a kind of a wider, a broader sort of issue in the UK, which is this sort of the feelings of disenfranchisement and sort of political neglect that's happening in our country. We saw this in the lead up to the Brexit vote. People voted to leave in part because they were feeling like they had not been listened to, and the politicians, particularly in Westminster, were not paying attention to what they wanted and how they were feeling. And that was reflected in the winning slogan, "Take Back Control," was all about that. And I think that is what Reform UK, Nigel Farage Party, is capitalising on. And I think it will probably add as well to the call for some sort of voting reform, because I think what we're seeing here is that Britain is becoming a 5-party state. So this idea that it's just Labour or Conservatives is starting to slip away. Even though Labour is winning with a huge mandate, we are seeing the Lib Dems, for example, they're having a fantastic night. I'm sure they're very happy taking out the MPs that they are. The Greens are starting to do very well. We're seeing, even the former leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, he won his seat as an independent. So we're starting to see a sort of fracturing of this traditional, you vote this or this. I think people are starting to think, actually, not so keen on that. So I think Reform's surge in popularity will add weight to that argument for something like proportional representation or some different type of voting
Right,
system.
but what about Reform's position as we look to the future? I mean, Nigel Farage saying this is just the beginning. Just wait for what's about to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be totally honest, it worries me a little bit, but I do think that there is an element for me that if they get these people elected, and hopefully they will be held to account and they'll be scrutinized. I think one of the things that has irked me, particularly with Nigel Farage, is that he has largely got away without any real accountability. He has been able to sort of say what he wants, do what he wants. He's never really been elected to Westminster. So he's never really had the kind of scrutiny and pressure that he ought to have had for the kinds of things he said during the EU referendum, for example. He promised all sorts of things that we would get if we left the EU, none of which have materialized. So I think actually, in a sense, it's quite good to get him into Westminster. He can be held accountable. I think people will start to see that, in my opinion, he's a bit of a charlatan. So I'm not delighted at the election of Nigel Farage, but I think he will get the accountability that he needs.
All right, Pablo, good to talk to you. Appreciate that. Thanks a lot. Pablo Hanna there.